Mad Science Minutes, an examination and celebration of the proud field of mad science in entertainment. You know, the late 1970s were an exciting time in the field of reproductive medicine.
The first test tube baby was conceived and born. The first commercial sperm banks were founded, some specializing in Nobel Prize-winning donors. Well, one Nobel Prize-winning donor, anyway. Hitler clone production was ramping up from a mere hobbyist pastime into a full-on cottage industry.
And who better to cash in on topical alarmism than tonight's subject, Ralph Nelson's 1976 film, Embryo.
So, after the worst Bond movie title sequence of all time, we're introduced to our protagonist, Dr. Paul Holliston, played by Rock Hudson, who, speeding through a Scooby-Doo episode, accidentally runs down a sound effect.
Well, little lady, let's get you taken care of.
It's actually a Doberman, if that's not apparent enough, which wouldn't be that surprising, as this movie was shot through a welding mask. Dr. Rock subsequently takes the dog back to his stately manor.
Did you find it hurt or did you hit it?
Oh, Martha, she ran out in front of the car. I couldn't stop in time.
All right. Were you asleep at the wheel? Careful.
Turn on those lights.
Okay. All right, just a minute, Paul.
Luckily, as Super Doc had been cruising for hookers that night, he already has his home dissection parlor prepped and ready. Just kidding, of course. He's actually a research scientist, and this is his perfectly normal home laboratory, which he shared with his late wife, as we later learn.
Good to see him working again. You know, he hasn't been in the lab since Mother died.
Oh, you're going to have to connect it. Hang the tube up there. Now insert the needle right in the tube here.
Insert it? Okay.
Alcohol.
Okay.
Okay.
Say, fun fact. Anyone know the difference between dry cerebral procedural and padding the film? No? Neither does this movie.
How long, Nicole, where in all this are you?
My sister's still here, Paul. With us.
No, she isn't. And I'm still guilty. Does it make it easier for you?
No.
You still resent the fact that I walked away without a scratch? Nicole's gone. And I'm still here. You can't accept that, Martha. And neither can I. So you see, we agree. As simple as that.
Change my mind. Can we have some more of people staring at tubes, please?
Is there anything else?
No, that's fine, thank you.
I've got some coffee that I have made. I'll get it for you.
Fine.
Fine, whatever. Get lost. So, after some more phalanx grinding and/or tedium, Dr. Paul discovers that not only is the dog not likely to make it, but that she's carrying puppies. He declares that there's a chance he might be able to save them at least, and orders Lady Pinkrobe to call up his son Gordon in the middle of the night to fetch him some pharmaceutical supplies. Cue exposition theater.
Tell me again. 20 micrograms of thyroxine, 30 million units of penicillin, and 10 units of canine blood.
And some ether.
And hurry up.
Be there as quick as I can, Dad.
So what's happening?
I don't know, but he called. First time since the accident. really excited about something.
Yeah, so was I.
What are you doing?
It's called getting dressed. First you
Get
put
back
on
to
your...
bed before you both catch cold.
Oh, no, nothing doing. We have unfinished business. You know, on the way home, that lookout point on Mulholland Drive would be the perfect place.
Helen.
Stop. Well, I'm very adaptable, as well as being very sexy. Being pregnant does that, John. It makes you sexier.
God gives me strength.
Don't give it a second thought, darling. It is all taken care of. You see, God is a liberated female, and she is on my side.
Happy, cheerful couple, expressing hope for the future. Vivacious, chipper, pregnant lady. We should probably just break out the trash bags and chainsaws right now, shouldn't we?
Cutting back to Dr. Paul's lab, we get to see him grafting a cutesy little puppy fetus puppet to the mother dog's blood supply, and taking his time at it.
Apparently the little scamp in the tank there was running on internal batteries while he switched to the new umbilical, I guess.
Gordon and Helen soon arrive with the Gray Market Pharmaceuticals to prattle a bit over Paul's groovy new basement hydroponics setup.
I'm trying to save the pups.
You mean these things are alive?
2 of them are now.
They don't resemble their mother very much.
They're alive. And that makes them beautiful.
Madam, when you've been up to your elbows in a vat of dermatid larvae a few dozen times, then you could talk about the inherent beauty of life.
Shortly afterwards, another one of the puppets dies. A despairing Paul, noting that the mother dog has less than 12 hours to live, announces to his log that he's begun treatment with placental lactogen.
Placental lactogen is a growth hormone Nicole, that is Dr. Nicole Holliston and I, were experimenting with at the time of her death. It will either cause rapid development of the fetus due to accelerated growth of molecular cell structures, or the patient will die within hours.
And indeed, hours later, just in the nick of time, Paul successfully decants a dry little puppy.
The depuppetization serum has triumphed!
However, while the puppy is now normal and healthy, and the placental lactogen safely discontinued, Paul makes a somewhat questionable medical decision. This will become a recurring theme for him.
I've decided to recommence intravenous feeding of placental lactogen, the growth hormone, to study further how the rapid growth progresses.
Because, of course, the most important thing to do with an almost completed experiment that you only even undertook in an emergency life-saving attempt is start fiddling around with variables to see what happens to the subject.
Seemingly successful, with no side effects from further mutating the puppy into adulthood, Paul decides to not release any of the results of his test until he's sure it has no side effects, and pass the puppy off as its own mother, even to his friends and family.
Because of Fnord, apparently.
You? It's a shame you weren't able to save any of the pups.
So are we going to look for that dog's owner or not? She had a collar. But as it turns out, apparently the dog, number 1, is not only healthy, but super intelligent, inspiring Paul.
I have decided to attempt, under controlled conditions, a similar experiment with a human embryo.
Come on! That's not even enough to be symbolism, that's omobilism. And you know, maybe old Super Doc there should have thought of testing the elixir on rats, or more dogs, or primates, before experimenting on humans. You know, make sure they don't explode or turn into the blob or something. Might be a little easier, too, to get animals for experiments than human on the hoof. Plus, well, not to be that guy, but technically he didn't even have a control group for that first experiment. There are procedures to follow if you expect to make it past peer review.
Paul goes to his old hospital to make the necessary under-the-table arrangements for his new project, taking along number 1, who uses the occasion to get out and murder a cute dog.
Scary music aside, that might just have been a normal dog reaction.
Over cigarettes with the hospital administrator, an old colleague of his, Dr. Paul makes his pitch. He wants a human fetus, one too young to possibly survive on its own otherwise, from an accident or some such, to test his serum on. It comes across sane and reasonable enough. Ish.
Nicole had 3 miscarriages before we had Gordon. They were all genetically perfect, but they died because they came into the world too soon. The children that Nicole and I didn't have will in their own way live. Now help me, Jim, please.
Well, that sounds like professional, level-headed clinical detachment to me. You're on.
Blood type A.
Well, that may take a little while. I'll let you know.
I have a temporary life support container in the car. I'll get it.
Sometime later, the admin calls up Rock. They've got an attempted suicide who's not going to make it, and she has a 15-week-old fetus ripe for the plucking.
So we get the classic old-timey stigma of a suicide, and that's really all we hear of it. We don't find out the patient shot herself because Abby Normal knocked her up or anything. And a probably brain-dead patient. You know what that means? Organ and tissue buffet with no consent forms to worry about.
What's with the ambulance? Are you doing an experiment?
Go away.
Paul, may I help you, please? Paul.
Go away. Go away.
I'd like to.
Bug off.
Paul.
Setting up the format for the next 10 minutes or so of film, Dr. Rock prattles alone into a reel-to-reel his actions and observations as he proceeds with the experiment. Doing so, he brings up an unusually sensible note. In this early stage of testing, he doesn't actually expect this fetus to even survive long. As he puts it,
Chances for the experiment to succeed are minimal because of the immature development of the fetus. If enough is learned from this and other experiments, it's possible that within a few years, placental lactogen can be used to save miscarried infants and allow them to live.
If you don't expect to succeed anyway, you'd probably have better results if you, I don't know, went with more dog experiments?
besides that, the man already has an artificial womb machine operational, and at least one guy at the hospital knows how to prep and use it already. So why does he even need the fetal growth potion? This is like raising someone from the dead so they can help fix your Ouija board. Bah! Anyways, back to the tedious procedurals. As it turns out, the placental lactogen works much better than expected. The fetus develops healthily and rapidly, and just over 4 days later...
Growth hormone discontinued, and the baby transferred to an isolette at 9:10 p.m., February 9th. After running tests tomorrow, I must decide the best way of breaking the news to the medical association. I have no delusions about the legal problems I will have to face.
Well, you said it, Super Doc. However, his slapdash damage control plans are shattered the following morning when he discovers a terrifying thing. The patient is still continuing to grow at an accelerated rate despite discontinuation of the serum. Over the next week, the girl's growth rate climbs alarmingly to 2 biological years every 24 hours, with Paul unable to arrest it.
I've worked for 25 years to save life. And now if the girl lives, I've robbed her of a part of her life. I can't even justify bringing others in for consultation. It's my responsibility alone.
You know, this works a lot better as a plot contrivance if you assume he's supposed to be a self-absorbed control freak with a martyr complex.
After another quick montage of his repeated failed attempts to stop the girl's growth with various therapies and blinken light machining, we get to the silver bullet.
February 24, 7 a.m. Administering 50 cc of methotrexate. A risk because it's a very strong drug and highly addictive. If methotrexate doesn't arrest the rapid aging, I have no choice but to transfer the girl to the research clinic. I can't cope with it any longer.
Well, the important thing is that you knew when to go for help. Not when it was in the best interest of a patient who wasn't too far gone yet, but when you, personally, were getting too stressed out. That's actually progress. Victor Frankenstein would just lock the door and run off crying like a whiny little Byronist.
Luckily, the latest drug treatment seems to be a success, the rapid aging finally arrested, giving the doc time to ruminate a bit.
Why should number one and the girl react differently to the placental laxogen? I've run tests on both. The main difference seems to be that the puppy feed is dependent on its mother, the circulatory system, blood supply. The human fetus existed on an artificial system.
Admittedly, something I might have discovered if I'd performed animal tests before moving on to human experiments. C'est la vie. Now, I had some trouble calculating exactly how much intravenous nutrition that the doc would have needed to support the patient's development so far. My conservative estimates start at the dozens of gallons of chemicals as a baseline. But luckily, that doesn't seem to have been a concern for old Dr. Rock, who now decides to take it upon himself to keep the girl with him and prepare her as much as possible for the outside world. Beginning with a regime of subliminal education.
Let us repeat. 1 and 1 are 2. 2 and 2 are 4.
Because you can do that now, I guess. Come to think of it, why the hell does he even have subconscious teaching equipment at an adolescent-sized incubator ready in his basement in the first place?
Not long afterwards,
4 and 4 are 8. 8 and 8 are 16.
And we have our heroine, Barbara Carrera. Also, being catatonic for the first 20 biological years of her life, according to modern neuroscience, she's also likely completely blind.
Because her visual cortex was never properly trained or developed. Also, she's probably incontinent and paralyzed, and likely unable to speak or comprehend language. And once removed from isolation, probably will exhibit severe psychological and emotional shock characterized by demi-autistic symptoms, complete deficits in every form of social response, and a 15 to 30% chance of death due to auto-starvation in the first week. That last one was confirmed by experiments on newborn monkeys in the 60s. Moving on.
Of course, this turns out not to be the case. Wandering back from nap time, Paul discovers the incubator empty, and lo and behold, the patient herself standing before him. I'm pretty sure. With this lighting, that could just be number one in a wig.
Understand what I'm about to say, but through my own inadequacy, you have missed the most wondrous part of your life. I shall do my best to make up to you what's been lost. Victoria? Yes, Victoria.
To us, you and I,
You shall be Animala.
Let's see. Paul makes notes into his recorder, notices that Vicky's trying to talk, decides to help and encourage this, aiding her to recite the easiest, or perhaps only thing he remembers putting on the reel-to-reel, the multiplication tables.
And 16 are 32. 32 and 32 are 64. Let us repeat.
He seems mightily pleased with himself, and everyone is happy. The next morning, Paul manages to get his sister-in-law out of the house for a few days. In the meantime, leaving Vicky to wander around the house, pantsless, with no shoes, no sense of self-preservation, the reach and upper body strength of an adult, and within arm's grasp of lamps, kitchen utensils, and all that unsecured lab equipment.
Prenatal problems, nothing. I'm surprised this guy managed to raise one child to survive to adulthood.
Initiating the training montage in private, Paul delightedly notes that, like the dog, Vicky is not only perfectly healthy, but has similar incredible intelligence and ability to learn.
While most of us are capable of using a fraction of our brain capacity, she is able to utilize hers 100%, or damn close to it.
So she's constantly having a grand mal seizure, then.
Hello? Well, Paul, where are you? Are you being properly devilish?
Did you get it? Tell Martha to enjoy herself. Take a rest from the house till I get back.
Paul shoos away the family for a little longer while the movie sets up its next bit of clever foreshadowing. Unquote.
What did you think of it?
An interesting story, but not very logical.
This Bible is much more than just a story. It's an account of the way the world actually began.
From what I've learned, that's impossible.
Well, you're not alone in thinking that way. But to many, the moral values are what's important.
Moral values?
Yes, the... in time.
Wait. Is that the first exposure to moral instruction you gave her? Just threw some Bible at her and hoped it would stick? Compare that to, say, Terminator 2.
Listen to me very carefully, okay? You just can't go around killing people.
Why?
Because you just can't, okay? Trust me on this. Now, you gotta promise me you're not gonna kill anyone, right?
Right.
Swear?
What?
Just put up your hand and say, I swear I won't kill anyone.
I swear I will not kill anyone.
I humbly submit that if you give less behavioral fail-safes to your pet project, Pygmalion Supergirl, than a killbot being sent into combat, you may need to re-examine your training methodology and doctrine.
Victoria. I like my name. Why am I called that?
Because you were a victory for both of us.
Because Eve was too obvious, Lilith was too clever for you, and Alpha, of course, is a boy's name.
Now a walk in the garden for some cheery rehashing, self-congratulation, a touch of exposition, and a dash of foreshadowing.
Couldn't you have gone for help?
If the methotrexate hadn't worked, I would have. But thank God it did.
Why, thank God. What would have been so bad about going for help?
I'd have put you into a clinic. There you'd have been a strange happening, an exhibit. Something under glass to be looked at, examined, experimented with.
A freak.
A freak.
I would have hated that.
I know.
Can it happen now?
You're not supposed to eat that. A flower is supposed to be looked at and admired.
Boy, my snark just writes itself, don't it?
Perhaps if you'd been taken from the womb when you were more developed, say 6 or 7 months, the growth hormone wouldn't have reacted as it did. But that's something we'll never know. A 6-month fetus has a chance for life on its own. To experiment and fail at that stage would be murder. And that I will not do.
Who am I, Paul? Who are my parents?
Your mother gave her name as Anne Smith. She died shortly after you were taken from her.
And her real name?
I don't know. They were never able to trace her.
My father?
Your mother never would say.
Character's excuse, writer's excuse, or the remains of an early draft of the script. Your guess is as good as mine. Wait, how does he even know all this? He's basically been in the lab for weeks, right? He's just making this all up, isn't he?
After Martha unexpectedly stops back by to steal a lamp and or snoop around, ominously spooking number 1 and Vicky, the former scaring off Martha with the Moog synthesizer. Paul is convinced to go on an impromptu 2-week vacation to show off the world to Victoria, depicted entirely through stock private footage and voiceover.
Wasn't 2 weeks enough?
It was wonderful, but too short. I loved every minute of it anyhow. The plaza, the shops, the people, the marvelous old mission. Once or twice people stared at me, and I... did I make a mistake, Paul?
No, you didn't make any mistakes. It's just that sometimes they take it all for granted. Your enthusiasm made them aware of what they were missing.
Is that good?
Very good.
Couldn't even spring for an afternoon filming at the boardwalk, huh? Just did it all in post. Nice going.
We're almost there. Let's hear it.
Victoria Spencer, from Denver, Colorado. Parents deceased.
An unexpected party at Gordon and Helen's presents the chance for Vicky to make her debut, where she performs smashingly with the guests, mildly showing up, apparently, a sleazy 70s guy.
As Oscar Wilde would say, give me deeper darkness. Money is not made in the light.
Excuse me. I believe it was Mr. George Bernard Shaw.
Of course.
Ironically, not unlike Achilles and Penthesilea, this is the exact moment that poor sleazy 70s guy falls in love with her. What?
What a lady.
Although she draws the attention and ire of Martha.
This is my sister-in-law, Martha Douglas.
Paul has spoken of you so many times.
Really? Well, I'm afraid he hasn't mentioned you.
It's the first time you've seen him in... Forget it. Moving on.
And even takes on the party guest who took up a third of the film's budget, evil chess master Roddy McDowell.
Chess is one of the last bastions of male chauvinism. Would you like to challenge the champion?
Thank you.
Although Paul, horrified, of course, at the prospect of Victoria achieving something outside of his control, quickly nips this in the bud, signaling her to throw the match. Hilariously.
I don't understand.
Huh? Oh, yes, you do. Oh, yes, you do. You understand damn well that is San and Man versus Staunton. The match was played in Paris on December the 6th, 1843. It's a classic game. You let me win! Oh! She let me win! Nobody lets me win! Get me out of here! Nobody!
Lousy human bastards!
Why did you wish me to lose?
Because you should have lost.
But chess is only a game. There's a logical progression to the conclusion.
There are some things you can't get out of books. To understand them, you have to be experienced. Be patient.
Some IBM researchers would probably beg to differ, but as it turns out, this is mostly just the setup for the next pothole of a Sulci in the plot's twisted little mind.
could teach me.
The mating, rather predictably, ensues. Afterwards, Victoria sneaks off by herself to prance about before a mirror a bit, merrily reveling in life and womanhood, when suddenly...
Aw, such fitting, sick jokes I could make right here that there's no way in hell I'd ever get away with.
Deciding not to go to Paul for help about the attack, apparently still worried about becoming a research freak under glass, as per a voiceover flashback, Vicky instead tests herself in the basement lab. The results? Her cells have started rapid aging again, which she treats by self-medicating with the addictive drug used to arrest the process before. It works, if only for the moment.
Where is,
After another character-endearing interlude with Martha the next morning,
Curie this morning. 2 impressive degrees. And she's how old?
Martha, you go through life as if you were constantly sucking on a lemon.
Vicky pops off to consult with Sleazy 70s Guy, who happens to run a magic movie computer sweatshop.
Here's the medical unit you asked about.
May I ask you a question?
You know how to operate a computer?
Yes.
Now, type out the pertinent background data here, and then the question. More.
You know, in the old days, you didn't so much program a computer or search it for information as much as offer up a fatted calf so that the oracle might deign to speak.
But Colossus is pleased with their offering, as it happens, and bestows upon them a dramatic plot dilemma.
Antidote. 70 milliliters pituitary gland extract from unborn fetus. 5 to 6 months development.
Ha! And our enforced ethical dilemma of the movie. And really, courtesy of an unhelpfully vague answer. Okay, so Colossus says we need a pituitary gland extract from a 5 to 6 month old fetus. Why? What's in the gland that you need? Tissue? A chemical? A protein? Why does it have to be a 5-month-old fetus? Is it some quality of a fetus's gland that old, or do you just need the equivalent mass of a single 5-month-old gland? Could you use several 1-month-old glands?
In fact, checking my figures again, you'd need significantly more than one 5-month-old fetus to provide the required amount of antidote stated. But this is based on speculation, crude calculations based on 90-year-old medical reports concerning industrial brain harvests, and the assumption that the film actually knew what pituitary gland extract is, none of which I can confidently vouch for.
Does it have to be exactly 5 months old, or at least 5 months? Could you use one from an adult? Does it have to be from a live specimen, or even a freshly dead one? Could you use a long-dead preserved one? Does it even have to be human? Or could another primate work? Or even just another mammal? For all we, or Victoria knows, she could solve all her problems by stopping at a slaughterhouse on the way home, slipping the right guy a 10, and getting a pile of calves' brains. She could probably pick up a nice brisket for dinner while she was there.
After a final farewell to Sleazy 70s Guy, we get the standard touching last innocent joy in the face of encroaching mortality montage.
Ultraviolet did it better. God help us.
Which continues until Vicky has another episode while frolicking on the beach. Mostly to justify another scene featuring that dog they blew all the money training. Followed by the pathos of the poor woman struggling to keep herself alive with painful injections of dinner party!
Couldn't top it in one of the finest restaurants in Marseille.
Thank you.
It's nice to be appreciated. La Rousse Gastronomique recommends a touch more tarragon. I'll get the coffee.
Egads! That freak is daring to offer cooking suggestions. The natural-born domain of a human woman. Humanity's an endangered species. What hath science wrought?
When is your baby due?
According to my calculations, I am 5 months, 25 days, and about 2 hours.
Meanwhile, there's another unpleasant encounter with the dog, who later finally starts barking at Paul.
Then you took it the wrong way, Martha. What's the matter with you?
I don't know what's the matter with me. I didn't take anything the wrong way. I can't stand to be in the same room with that woman. I am
why?
frightened. She frightens me, Paul.
I don't see why. For heaven's sake, she's been nothing but nice to you. You've chosen not to be nice to her.
I have checked, Paul. Your precious Victoria isn't any research assistant. She never went to the University of Colorado. Just who is she? I'd like to know any longer. You gotta choose, Paul, between your assistant and me.
But while Martha gives a it's her or me ultimatum, oh, gee, wonder how that's gonna turn out, Victoria, panicking, decides to inject the woman with some magic-delayed murder serum during the night.
Because of snored again.
Martha stomps off in a huff to Minneapolis, and to our relief and Paul's inexplicable sorrow, she's dead of a heart attack within a day. Vicky convinces him to go ahead and leave her alone while he flies out to take care of the proper burial arrangements.
A moment's courage and it is done. Place the point of the heart. Then in God's name strike. Do it now!
While she destroys his notes and studies up for some good old-fashioned fetus harvesting. Breaking into the hospital after hours provides Victoria with the addresses of potential source material. However, she clumsily drops an enforced plot contrivance note included in the file before she's off to everyone's favorite source of untraceable, unmissable body parts.
Good evening. I understand I can rent you?
Sorry, honey, I'm not into dykes.
I'll pay you $200 if you accompany me to my home for the evening.
For $200? Could learn to like it. Come on in while I change.
Thank you.
But no rough stuff, huh?
I understand your condition.
I doubt it.
Pregnant, underage, lesbian, prostitute, laboratory sex. Also involving a dog. Proceed.
Over in the land of lakes, the coroner avers that Martha's heart attack was chemically induced, and by one of the experimental drugs that Paul had tried on Victoria. To arrest the aging, I mean. And he realizes that she may be behind it.
But meanwhile, back at the lab, we get... wait for it... Oh, how horrid! That's awful.
Although it seems the hooker puppet was a dead end.
Ironically, the fetus was unusable because it was ancephalic. You get it? Because then there's no... it's really just forget it. Moving on.
Luckily, Helen chooses just this moment to stop by for the weekend. Initially trying to drive her off so she can be alone with her pain and corpses, Victoria quickly realizes the value of keeping her around for an all-girls sleepover. By which I mean, of course, slip her a Mickey and get to the dissecting. Failing to contact his house, and finally putting two and two together, Paul collects his son for backup and the two charge in to investigate, Paul explaining what he'd done along the way.
Why did you do it?
To give life.
Thank God.
Emphasis on playing, I think. That wasn't a sex crack, it's just that I've seen more professional rigor from a Moroccan comprachicos.
Arriving at Paul's house, they discover the mangled hooker dumped in the basement, and, realizing it's not one of his, call an ambulance before rushing to the lab.
I don't want to kill her. But I will if it's necessary.
Why? Tell me why, Victoria.
Helen can have more babies. I must have this one.
Well, honestly, she makes a convincing argument. Let's get to it.
Victoria spells out her problem and begs them to let her finish her work.
From Helen's baby?
I don't want to kill. I don't want to kill. I just want to live.
But Paul makes a try of giving her an overdose, I think. There's a struggle, and...
Oh, should have paid extra for the Perspex tank.
Vicky escapes in the fracas, and Paul directs the promptly arriving ambulance to take care of Helen. But now it's time for heroic triage decision-making.
So, at this point, you're Paul, a medical doctor, and you've got...
the implicitly dead, though not actually confirmed so in dialogue, mutilated hooker in the basement, that you actually called the ambulance for in the first place, your son, who seems to be clinically dead from a 1-inch scalpel wound to the shoulder blade, who you haven't bothered treating yet, and you're just past the date of potential viability grand fetus lying on the floor of your lab. The lab where you have the emergency artificial womb equipment and experimental fetus growth serum waiting.
So, what do? Why, run outside for a car chase.
After an exceedingly ill-lit car battle between two badly aging drivers, not unlike a Batman movie, Vicky is forced off the road, where Paul attempts to perform the delicate Bromden maneuver.
Die, damn it, die!
He's stopped, however, by the chance arrival of the authorities.
Let me go! What are you doing, Nicholas? She's got to die! Back. No! No, let me go! You don't understand!
She's infectious. No, that's not it. I mean, she's a dangerous superpowered mutant. No, that's not true. Oh, I mean, she made a fool out of me, and I really, really want revenge.
And it shortly revealed that Vicky's pregnant, and in labor, and it's Paul's.
It can't happen! Die! God damn you, die! Both of you!
It's your baby. It's your baby.
My personal failings are exposed. The world will see the birth of a child that's either perfectly normal or terminally ill. I can think of no more appropriate sound to play out this flick.
So, Embryo. Truly a monument to the hazards of self-important incompetence. And the characters were all twits, too.
You could say that this was the point of the film. That Dr. Paul was a flawed, wounded man being goaded by the demons of his losses and his own hubris into meddling with things he didn't even try to really understand, his bombed ego blinding him from even considering any failure in his work and shattering violently when circumstances, or people, like Victoria, deviated from his domineering plans, if it had been done intentionally.
But then again, if that were the case, I wouldn't have thought they'd have done the set lighting so poorly as well. Still, from this clumsy muddle of a flick, we can still salvage one very important lesson. That is, killing embryonic research specimens is not only scientifically justifiable, but generally a good safety precaution so they can't kill you or your loved ones first. Also, always use protection. This has been Mad Science Minutes. Stay tuned for our next episode, either the review of Frankenhooker or my list of the top 9 movie scenes of people floating in glass tubes. Until next time!
razor, 'cause baby's insane. The telephone number, new lock on the door, hide all the nights, 'cause baby's insane. Baby's insane. Baby's insane. Baby's on a trip to the moon again. Baby's insane. Baby's insane. Hide all the night, 'cause baby's insane. She runs down your birthday till the cat's on the lawn. Oh, Betty Claus, at the sound of your name, don't knock on a window, don't knock.
How revolting. Sauce is good.